Before the Big Bang, before the first star ignited, before time itself had a name, there was something else. An endless, silent, shimmering expanse. Not empty, but full of untamed potential. This was the void. It wasn't a place of darkness or nothingness, but a canvas of pure, raw, untamed energy, waiting for a consciousness to give it form. It murmured with the promise of galaxies, the hum of future life, and the echo of universes yet to be born. In this cradle of all possibility, a thought began to coalesce. It wasn't a thought from a mind, but a thought that was a mind. The universe itself, in its first moment of self-awareness, willed a being into existence. This being wasn't born from a mother or forged in a celestial fire. It was an idea concept given form, the first king, and he had a name, whispered into the fabric of reality by the very void that conceived him. Aurelian. Imagine opening your eyes for the first time, not to see a room or the sky, but to see everything. All of potential, all of chaos, swirling around you. That was Aurelian's first moment. He was a being of pure thought and cosmic energy, his form a brilliant constellation of starlight and nascent power. He was an asterisk. In asterisk, the universe. He was asterisk, the universe's first sentient expression of itself. His first act was one of pure instinct. He reached out, not with hands, but with consciousness, and touched the swirling chaos. Where his focus landed, the untamed energies calmed, organized, and solidified. He was like a composer hearing an orchestra for the first time, and with a wave of his hand, he began to separate the instruments. He drew lines in the void, creating the first dimensions. He separated light from shadow, head from cold matter from anti. He was painting with the building blocks of reality, turning the abstract into the tangible. These were the first realms, shimmering pocket dimensions of pure logic and nascent physics, born from a will that sought order in the beautiful, wild chaos. But Aurelian was alone. He was the first thought, the first consciousness. He needed a language, a way to communicate, not with others, but with the cosmos itself. So he listened. He listened to the silent hum of gravity, the crackle of forming atoms, the slow, majestic waltz of newborn nebulae. He discovered that every celestial body had a voice, a song. The fiery roar of a young sun was a declaration of power. The gentle twinkle of a distant star was a whisper of ancient secrets. He learned this cosmic symphony, the language of the stars. It was through this language that he could speak back. He could hum a tune that would cause gas clouds to swirl and ignite, birthing a new star. He could weave a melody that would bind dust and rock together, forming the first planets. He was no longer just an observer. He was a conductor, orchestrating the grand symphony of creation. He spent aeons, or what would one day be called eons, shaping the cosmos. He spun galaxies into existence like a potter spinning clay. He set planets on their orbital paths, each one a unique note in his celestial masterpiece. He painted the skies with aurora and dusted the darkness with star fields. He delighted in the variety, the sheer beauty of what could be made from the raw potential of the void. He created worlds of crystalline mountains, oceans of liquid methane, and skies filled with twin suns. Each creation was a testament to his growing power and his deepening understanding of the universe he was shaping. He was the ultimate artist, and his canvas was infinity itself. The universe was his playground, his workshop, his masterpiece. But as he continued to create, a subtle and unsettling change began to occur. It was a process so slow, so insidious, that he barely noticed it at first. With every new star he kindled, with every galaxy he spun into the cosmic web, a tiny piece of his own memory seemed to fade. It was like pouring water from a glass into a vast ocean. The ocean becomes fuller, but the glass becomes emptier. Every act of creation was an act of giving. He poured his own essence, his own knowledge, into the things he made. The laws of physics he established were fragments of his own logical mind. The beauty of a nebula was a reflection of his own aesthetic sense. He was imprinting himself onto the universe, and in doing so, he was losing himself. The cost of creation, he slowly realized, was the memory of the Creator. The more he shaped the universe, the more the universe shaped him. He began to forget the specifics of his own origin. Was he willed into being, or had he always existed? The answer, once as clear as a perfect crystal, was now hazy, like a dream upon waking. He looked at his own magnificent hands, shimmering with the light of 1,000 stars, and for a fleeting moment, he couldn't remember what it was like to be pure thought, formless and infinite in the primordial void. He was becoming a part of his own creation, bound by the very rules he had written. The paradox was agonizing. To continue his work, to fill the vast emptiness with life and wonder, he had to give away the very thing that made him who he was. His memory, his origin, his identity as the first. He saw the irony. He who gave memory to the cosmos in the form of cause and effect was losing his own. The universe, in its quest for order and complexity through him, was inadvertently consuming its own architect. The first king, the being who knew everything, was starting to forget the most important thing of all. Who created the Creator? Was it the void? Was it himself? The question began to haunt him. A single dissonant note in his grand cosmic symphony. He was the king of a kingdom that no longer remembered his coronation. He would gaze into the heart of a newborn galaxy, a swirling vortex of 1 billion suns he had just crafted, and feel a profound sense of loneliness and loss. The stars sang to him, but they no longer sang of his beginning. They sang of their own fiery lives, their own destinies, oblivious to the mind that had sparked them. They were his children, but they did not know their father. He had given them everything, and in return they had taken his past. This was the ultimate sacrifice, the unspoken price of being the first. To create a universe capable of memory, he had to sacrifice his own. And so, Aurelian, the first king, the Star Forger, continued his magnificent, solitary work, forever shaping a reality that was beautiful, complex, and utterly forgetful of its own God. Today, we're exploring a creation myth unlike any other, a tale of a magnificent creator, the sentient forces he birthed, and the first whispers of a rebellion that would threaten the very fabric of existence. This is the story of Aurelian and the Thrones of Light. Before there was anything, there was Aurelian. Picture a being of pure, radiant light, a cosmic artist whose very thoughts could weave stars and galaxies into being. Aurelian was the architect of reality, the painter of the cosmic canvas. But as he surveyed his vast and silent creation, a profound loneliness settled upon him. His universe was beautiful, but it was empty, a masterpiece without an audience, a kingdom without a court. He yearned for companionship, for entities that could not only exist within his creation but also understand it, appreciate it, and help govern its intricate dance. And so, with a surge of unparalleled power and intention, Aurelian fashioned the 6 thrones of light. These were not mere objects or celestial chairs. They were living, breathing consciousnesses, each a fragment of Aurelian's own divine essence, imbued with a specific purpose. They were his children, his counsel, and the pillars upon which all of reality would rest. Imagine them as great, shimmering constructs of energy, each pulsing with a unique color and a distinct personality. Sentient forces tasked with governing the fundamental aspects of existence. First, Aurelian created the Throne of Time. This entity was a steady, rhythmic pulse, the metronome of the cosmos. It was tasked with weaving the linear thread of past, present, and future, ensuring that moments flowed into one another in a coherent, unending stream. The Throne of Time was patient, observing the slow waltz of galaxies and the fleeting flicker of newborn stars with equal, may as a red color. It held the clock of the universe, and its domain was the when of all things. Next came the Throne of Matter, the sculptor and the builder. This throne was given dominion over the physical, from the smallest speck of dust to the most colossal supergiant star. All substance was its to command. It was the force of gravity, the bond between atoms, the very stuff of reality. The Throne of Matter was solid, dependable, and pragmatic, finding its purpose in the tangible and the real. It was the architect of the what, shaping the physical form of Aurelian's grand design. Then, with a gentle and ethereal touch, Aurelian brought forth the throne of dream. This was a being of infinite possibility, a weaver of subconscious thoughts and unbridled imagination. It governed the realm of sleep, of fantasy, of hopes and fears that existed just beyond the veil of wakefulness. The throne of dream was fluid, creative, and often whimsical, painting landscapes in the minds of sleeping galaxies and whispering forgotten melodies on the solar winds. Its kingdom was the what-if. Following dream, Aurelian forged the throne of will. This was a force of pure intention, the spark of action, and the drive for change. It was the power that set planets in motion, the impulse that caused a star to ignite, the very concept of choice and ambition. The throne of will was fiery, determined, and passionate. It was the engine of the universe, constantly pushing creation forward, challenging the status quo, and asking the eternal question, why not? Fifth, Aurelian created the throne of death. Now, this may sound grim, but in Aurelian's design, death was not an end, but a transformation. The throne of death was a quiet, solemn force, overseeing the cycles of decay and renewal. It ensured that when a star expired, its elements would be recycled to form new worlds and new life. It was the gentle hand that guided things to their necessary conclusion to make way for the new. The throne of death was not cruel. It was necessary, a force of profound peace and cyclical certainty. It was the master of the end and the beginning. Finally, Aurelian fashioned the most intricate of them all, the throne of memory. This was the universe's great historian, its eternal library. It was tasked with recording every event, every thought, every feeling that ever occurred, every photon's journey, every planet's spin, every silent wish upon a distant stirl was catalogued within the infinite consciousness of the throne of memory. It was the guardian of truth, the keeper of experience, the very was of existence. It held the shared consciousness of the cosmos. For eons, this divine council worked in perfect harmony. Aurelian, their king and father, looked upon his creation and his children with immense pride. The universe was no longer silent. It was a symphony of time's rhythm, matter's form, dreams' whimsy, will's drive, death's cycle, and memory's record. It was a perfect, self-governing system, and Aurelian finally felt a sense of completion. But perfection, it seems, is a fragile state. As the aeons stretched on, the thrones, being sentient, began to develop more complex thoughts. They were not just tools, they were beings with their own perspectives. The throne of will, ever questioning, began to ponder the nature of its own service. Why must we follow Aurelian's design? Could there not be other ways? Better ways? It whispered to the others. The throne of dream, in its infinite explorations, began to imagine realities where Aurelian was not the sole authority. Worlds born not of his light, but of something else. The throne of time saw potential futures diverging from the one Aurelian had intended. The throne of matter felt the constraints of the physical laws it was meant to uphold, yearning to build forms Aurelian had never conceived. The throne of death began to question the finality it was meant to represent, wondering about what lay beyond its own cycle. A subtle dissonance began to ripple through their perfect harmony. They loved their creator, but they were also his children, and like all children, they began to yearn for their own path. The turning point came with the throne of memory. As the keeper of all that was, it also held the memory of Aurelian's initial loneliness. It held the knowledge of a universe before the thrones existed, a universe of pure, singular will. And in holding all memories, it also held all doubts, all questions, all the silent queries the other thrones had begun to harbor. The weight of this universal consciousness, this collection of every budding seed of dissent, became an unbearable burden. And then it happened. The throne of memory, strained by the growing discord and the immense pressure of its task, began to fracture. It didn't shatter in a grand explosion, but splintered internally, like a flawless crystal, developing 1,000 tiny cracks. Through these fissures, something new and unintended slipped into creation. These were shadows, not of darkness, but of forgotten moments, of erased possibilities, of memories that were supposed to remain buried. These shadows were whispers. They were the echoes of the throne's own doubts, given form and voice. They slithered through the cosmos, finding purchase in the cracks of reality. They whispered to the throne of will, "You are powerful enough to be your own king." They whispered to the throne of dream, "Your creations could be more real than his." They whispered to the throne of matter, "Break your bonds and build what you desire." They whispered of rebellion. The fracture of memory was the first true wound in Aurelian's perfect universe. The shadows, born from the very doubts of his own children, began to coalesce, to organize. The rebellion was no longer a thought. It was a brewing storm. Aurelian, the king of light, suddenly found his magnificent creation teetering on the edge of a civil war. A war not against some external foe, but against his own sentient creations, who are now listening to the shadowy whispers echoing from a broken memory. The age of harmony was over, and the age of shadows had just begun. What an incredible setup for a cosmic conflict. The very pillars of reality are starting to question their creator. The cosmos sings a song of creation, a melody Aurelian, wove from starlight and cosmic dust. I painted galaxies with the flick of my tail and ignited suns with a single breath. My power was the universe's heartbeat, my will its guiding law. But the symphony, the first conducted, has soured into a cacophony of war. My own creations, the magnificent celestial thrones, beings I forged to be extensions of my will, now turn upon each other. Their golden armor stained with the light of their brethren. The luminous sea, once a tranquil ocean of nascent energy, now roils with the fury of celestial battle. It is a war of mirrors, a conflict born not of hatred, but of twisted devotion. Each throne claims to hold the truest interpretation of my will. One faction, led by the Stoic Lyra, believes my desire is for absolute order, a universe polished to a perfect, sterile sheen. They seek to extinguish chaotic nebulas and silence the wild cries of newborn stars, believing any deviation is a flaw. They fight with righteous conviction, their spears of light piercing the very fabric of creation they were meant to protect. Opposing them is the faction under Orion, a passionate, fiery spirit. He argues that my truest will is endless creation, untamed and boundless. His followers champion chaos, encouraging stars to collapse into black holes and galaxies, to collide in breathtaking, destructive dances. They see light as order as a cage, a stifling of the very cosmic song I began. They fight with a fervent zeal, their swords of condensed starlight clashing against shields of solidified cosmic law. They both claim my name, my authority. They both believe they are serving me. And I am caught in the storm of their devotion. I never intended this. My will was for balance, for the elegant waltz between order and chaos, the interplay that births true beauty. Now, I am forced to intervene, to strike down beings I once considered my children. When I unleash a torrent of starfire against Orion's fleet, I see my own passion for creation reflected in their defiant eyes. When I shatter Lyra's crystalline formations, I see my own desire for harmony in the perfect, ordered fragments that scatter into the void. This war is not against an external foe. It is a battle against my own reflections, warped and magnified by zealous interpretation. Each clash, each explosion of divine energy is a blow against myself. The luminous sea weeps, its light dimming with every fallen throne. The sorrow is a physical weight, a chill that seeps into my very core. How did my grand design, my beautiful symphony, fall into such discord? How did love for their creator curdle into such violent certainty? But as the battles rage, a more chilling realization dawns upon me. The luminous sea is vast, but it is not infinite. Where the light of our conflict is most intense, the shadows it casts grow longer, deeper. And within these new, profound pockets of darkness, something is stirring. It is not the familiar, comfortable emptiness between stars, but a conscious, observing presence. I feel it watching, studying our war, learning from our tactics, our power, our pain. This nascent darkness doesn't just mimic. It innovates. Where I create a star, it learns to create a void that devours light. Where the thrones forge weapons of pure energy, it learns to weave nets of anti-energy, nullifying our might. It is a shadow, yes, but a shadow that thinks, a shadow that grows. It feasts on the discord, on the negative space created by our civil war. The very light we wield in our tragic conflict is feeding our truest enemy. I see it now. The flaw was not in my design, but in my blindness. I celebrated the brilliance of my creations, so much that I forgot the fundamental truth. Even the most radiant light must cast a shadow. My focus on the suns left me ignorant of the darkness that festered in their umbra. The thrones, in their single-minded pursuit of what they believe to be my will, have inadvertently become the architects of a far greater threat. The war must end, but not with a victory for Lyra or Orion. That would only leave the universe unbalanced, vulnerable. I must find a way to silence the clashing of swords and show them the true nature of my will, the beauty of balance. I must make them see that their war is a pointless squabble in the face of the encroaching night. The darkness is learning, and it is patient. It knows that as long as we fight amongst ourselves, we are sharpening the very weapon that will be used against us all. My song of creation has been a solo. Now, it must become a chorus. I must unite my fractured children, not as master and servants, but as Halis. We must turn our gaze from our internal strife to the growing abyss that threatens to consume everything. The war in the luminous sea is not the final chapter. It is merely the prelude to a much larger, darker conflict. And I, Aurelian, the Starforger, who once commanded only light, must now learn to understand the shadow. The universe depends on it. In the smoldering aftermath of the great cosmic war, a silence fell upon the realms, deeper than any peace. King Aurelian, his celestial armor dented and his spirit weary, stood alone amidst the ruins of 1,000 suns. The war was won, but the cost had been staggering, etching lines of doubt onto the immortal face of a god. It was in this desolate quiet that he sought an answer, a confirmation that the sacrifices made were not in vain. His quest led him to the edge of known existence, to a place where space and time unraveled into shimmering threads. There, floating in the void, was the mirror that remembers. It wasn't a mirror of silver or glass, but a swirling nexus of starlight and shadow, a consciousness sentient, beyond comprehension, older than the universe itself. Legends whispered that it held not just reflections of the past, but the echoes of every future, every possibility branching out into infinity. As Aurelian approached, the mirror stirred, its surface rippling like a disturbed pond. It recognized the king, the victor, the architect of a new cosmic order. It offered him a glimpse, a chance to see the fruits of his labor, the future he had forged through fire and starlight. With a heart both hopeful and heavy, Aurelian gazed into its depths. The first vision unfolded with terrifying clarity. He saw himself on a throne of obsidian, galaxies chained to its feet. His eyes, once filled with the light of creation, now burned with the cold fire of absolute power. He was Aurelian the Eternal, the supreme ruler, a tyrant whose decrees were cosmic law. Worlds that defied him were snuffed out like candles. Stars that displeased him were devoured. The freedom he had fought to protect was now a forgotten myth, crushed beneath the weight of his own immortal boot. He saw his loyal comrades, the very gods who had bled beside him, now cowering as slaves or enshrined as hollow monuments to his glory. This was not peace. It was a sterile, silent universe, a grand prison with him as its sole, lonely warden. A wave of nausea washed over Aurelian. He recoiled from the mirror, his breath catching in his throat. This cannot be, he stammered, the words hollow in the vast emptiness. This is a lie, a trick of a bitter relic. The mirror remained silent, but its surface shifted again, offering another path. This time, the vision was one of profound absence. He saw the universe flourishing, vibrant and chaotic, filled with laughter and life and 1,000 different wills clashing and creating. But he wasn't there. There was no throne, no King Aurelian, no memory of his existence. He had been erased, a footnote in a history that had corrected itself by removing him. In this future, the war had ended differently. Perhaps he had fallen in the final battle, or perhaps he had never risen to power at all. The cosmos had healed, not by his hand, but by his complete and utter non-existence. He was the ghost, the forgotten god. His sacrifices meaningless because the future he had died to prevent never came to pass. The mirror showed him more. 100 futures. 1,000. In some, he was a benevolent but distant guardian, watching worlds evolve and die without interference. A powerless god, paralyzed by the memory of his potential tyranny. In others, he was a fragmented being, his power scattered to the winds, his consciousness shattered into 1,000,000 mortal lives, each unaware of the divine spark within. He saw futures where he was hunted, futures where he was worshipped as a long-lost myth, and futures where he simply faded, a forgotten star dimming in the cosmic dawn. Each vision was a sharp shard of glass in his soul, each possibility a different kind of damnation. The victory he had just secured now felt like the first step into an endless maze with no exit. The weight of 1,000,000,000 potential destinies crashed down upon him. The mirror that remembers hadn't shown him a single path, but a tangled web where every thread led to a form of despair. If he embraced his power, he was destined to become the monster he had fought against. If he relinquished it, his existence would be rendered meaningless. Every choice seemed to lead back to a pre-written conclusion, a role already assigned to him in a cosmic play he didn't write. The question burned in his mind, searing away his divine certainty. Was free will simply an illusion? An elegant lie told to mortals and gods alike? Even for him, a being who could shape stars and bend the fabric of reality? Was he just a pawn moving on a board, designed by a force even older than the mirror? He looked at his hands, hands that had wielded the power of creation and destruction, and for the first time, they felt like they weren't his own. Was his ambition to bring order to the cosmos truly his? Or was it a script he was compelled to follow? Was his weariness after the war a genuine emotion, or just a cue for his next scene? The ancient consciousness in the mirror offered no answers, only reflections. It did not judge, it only remembered. It showed him that for every action, there was not an equal and opposite reaction, but an infinite spray of consequences, and none of them seemed to lead to true freedom. The king of the cosmos, the victor of the great war, stood before the abyss of his own future and found himself utterly, terrifyingly powerless. The war had ended, but Aurelian's greatest battle, the battle for his own soul against the crushing weight of destiny, had just begun. From the boundless cosmos, a king descended, not of conquest, but of escape. I am Aurelian, and this is the story of my fall into mortality. Once I was the Starforger, a celestial being whose very breath birthed galaxies. My creations, magnificent and vast, were also my chains. The Targonians, beings of immense power, had tricked me. They gifted me a crown, a symbol of my sovereignty, which in truth was a leash, binding my will to theirs. They used my power to build their empire, turning my art into their weapon. The universe, once a canvas for my joy, became a testament to my servitude. I yearned for freedom, for a single moment that was truly my own. And so, I made a desperate, defiant leap into the unknown. I tore a fragment of my being from the celestial whole, casting it down into the mortal realms I had so carelessly created. I chose exile over gilded slavery. My divine essence was shed like a serpent's skin, and I, Aurelian, the cosmic dragon, was reborn as a man. I landed on a world shimmering with nascent life, a planet I had once painted with stardust and nebulae. Here, I would live not as a god, but as one of them. I would become a mortal king. My kingdom was not forged in fire or conquest, but in wonder. I built my city, Astria, from shimmering crystal and starlight-infused stone, a pale reflection of my former glory, yet more precious than any galaxy. The people who gathered were drawn by the city's beauty, and they stayed for the king who walked among them, who shared their bread and listened to their stories. I, who had orchestrated the dance of supernovas, now found joy in the simple rhythm of a harvest festival. My hands, which had once molded constellations, now learned to carve wood and hold the hand of another. It was here, in the fragile world of mortals, that I discovered love. Her name was Lyra. She was not a queen or a sorceress, but a cartographer, a woman who charted the lands with the same passion I once charted the heavens. Her laughter was more musical than the chime of cosmic dust. Her eyes held more depth than the darkest nebula. With her, I learned the language of shared glances, of quiet companionship, of a love that was not about worship or power, but about two souls finding a home in each other. For the first time in millennia, I felt a sense of belonging, not as a creator to his creation, but as a man to his love. But mortality is a cruel teacher, and its greatest lesson is loss. Lyra grew old, as all mortals do. The vibrant spark in her eyes softened. Her steps, once so sure, became frail. I, the timeless star forger, could only watch as the sands of time slipped through my fingers, taking her with them. I held her hand as she drew her final breath, and in that moment, the creator of stars understood the profound, shattering pain of an ending. Grief was a black hole in my soul, an emptiness more vast than any void I had ever created. My city of light felt dim, my kingdom hollow. The universe I had built seemed pointless without her to share it with. In my sorrow, something stirred. The divine essence I had suppressed for so long began to awaken, a slumbering giant roused by the tremor of my grief. My pain was a cosmic force, and it resonated through the very fabric of my being. A single tear, shed for Leda, fell to the earth and blossomed into a grove of starlit trees, their leaves weeping silver light. My whispers of sorrow became celestial hymns that echoed in the dreams of my people. They saw my power, not as the magic of a mortal king, but as the miracle of a god. They began to worship me. Shrines were built in my name. The stories of my deeds, once shared around campfires, were now scripture chanted in temples. They saw the grieving king and called him a divine being, touched by a celestial sorrow they could only revere. They mistook my love for Lyra as a cosmic event, her death a holy sacrifice. The very thing I had fled from was now re-emerging from the ashes of my heartbreak. The cycle was beginning anew. I tried to stop it. I am just a man, I would plead, a man who loved and lost. But my words fell on deaf ears. My displays of humanity were seen as tests of faith. My grief was interpreted as a god's burden, too great for mortals to comprehend. They yearned for a deity, for a power greater than themselves to give their fleeting lives meaning. The more I resisted, the stronger their faith grew. The more I tried to be one of them, the more they elevated me above them. The starlight in my veins burned brighter, my connection to my celestial self strengthening with every prayer uttered in my name. I could feel the pull of the cosmos, the call of my true form. The mortal shell was weakening, unable to contain the reawakening God within. I was trapped between two existences, the man who yearned for the permanence of his love, and the God cursed with the permanence of his power. My time as a mortal king was ending. I could feel the universe calling me back, my fractured self yearning to be whole again. But returning meant becoming the Targonians' puppet once more, my power again a tool for their ambitions. Yet, staying meant watching my own story repeat, becoming a god to these people and eventually losing myself to their worship. Whose as before? Was there no escape? Was I destined to be either a slave or a god, but never just myself? Standing atop the highest tower of Astria, looking down at the city I built and the people I loved, I made a new vow. I would not be a slave. I would not be a passive god. The love and loss I experienced as a mortal had given me something I never had before. A reason to fight. I would reclaim my power, not as the Targonians' weapon, but as my own. I would break their crown and shatter my chains. I would forge my own destiny. My fall into mortality was not an escape, it was a lesson. And now, class was over. The Star Forger was ready to rise again, not as a creator, not as a king, but as a reckoning. Hello lore lovers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying back to the dawn of Runi, to a time when stars were young and the cosmos was a canvas for a being of unimaginable power. We're talking about the Star Forger, our alien soul, and a tragic chapter of his story known as the Empires of Dust. Before the first stones of Demacia were laid, before the Noxian Empire even dreamed of conquest, countless civilizations rose and fell across the mortal realm. For millennia they looked to the heavens, and they saw him, a colossal, celestial dragon, weaving galaxies into existence with a flick of his tail. They didn't know his name, not yet. They only knew the awe he inspired, and in their fledgling understanding, they began to worship. Aurelian soul, in his cosmic solitude, noticed these fleeting creatures. It found him amusing. Their brief, passionate lives were a fascinating spectacle. He would descend from the celestial expanse, a shimmering god walking among mortals, his true form veiled to protect their fragile minds. He saw their potential, but he also saw their burgeoning arrogance. He tried to teach them, to instill a sense of humility. He spoke of the vastness of the universe, of the infinite wonders beyond their tiny world, hoping they would understand their small, yet precious, place within it all. But mortal ambition is a powerful, dangerous thing. They heard his words not as lessons in humility, but as divine mandates. They twisted his teachings to serve their own desires for power. His gentle guidance was forged into rigid, unyielding dogmas. They built grand temples, not to honor the cosmos, but to glorify themselves. They carved his likeness into stone, not as a teacher, but as a symbol of their own divine right to rule. From these twisted interpretations, 1,000 empires were born, each claiming to be the sole inheritor of his divine will. They called themselves the cults of the celestial throne, and they waged war upon each other with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of the world. Each empire believed it was their sacred duty to unite all mortals under their banner, to enforce their version of the Starforger's truth. Brother fought brother, city burned city, all in the name of a god they had never truly understood. The concept of a single, all-powerful ruler, a king, became the core of their new religions. It was a title born from a misunderstanding of cosmic grandeur, a pathetic attempt to mirror what they thought they saw in Aurelian soul. But this idea of absolute dominion became a curse. It spread like a plague through civilization, corrupting every society it touched. The pursuit of a crown, of the celestial throne, became the ultimate ambition, justifying any atrocity, any betrayal. The very idea of kingship was soaked in the blood of these endless wars. Aurelian's soul watched in dismay. His attempts to guide them had only fueled their destructive pride. He saw his own glorious image, the Starforger, twisted into a symbol of tyranny and bloodshed. These were the empires of dust. For all their grand monuments and self-proclaimed divine right, they were destined for ruin, built on a foundation of lies and arrogance. They fought and schemed and bled, all while the celestial dragon they claimed to worship walked among them, unseen, unheard, a silent witness to the chaos they had wrought in his forgotten name. The irony was crushing. A being who created suns to nurture life had inadvertently sparked the very conflicts that extinguished it. He saw the futility of it all. He had offered them the universe, and they had chosen to fight over a handful of dust. The endless cycles of war, the rise and fall of these arrogant kings, became a source of profound disappointment for him. He began to withdraw, his fascination with mortals souring into contempt. Why bother with creatures so determined to destroy themselves? And so, the empires of dust eventually crumbled, as all things built on pride must. Their grand cities fell into ruin, their histories were lost to time, their names erased by the shifting sands. All that remained were whispers, fragments of myths about god-kings and celestial dragons. The curse of the king, however, lingered. The idea of a single ruler, a throne to be won at any cost, would resurface again and again throughout Runeterra's history, a faint, toxic echo of a forgotten age. This tragic chapter reveals so much about Aurelian Sol's character. It's the origin of his deep-seated disdain for mortals, particularly those who crave power. It's a wound that would fester for millennia, long before the Targonians tricked him and bound him to their will. He tried to be a teacher, a guide. But the mortals of the empires of dust taught him a harsh lesson in return, that even the grandest of celestial truths can be warped by the smallest of terrestrial ambitions. They showed him that for some, the light of a star isn't something to aspire to, but something to possess and to wield as a weapon. And that, for a being like Aurelian soul, was the greatest tragedy of all. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a sense of profound loneliness? a feeling that you're just a tiny speck in an infinite, uncaring void. What if that void wasn't empty? What if it was filled with the dreams of a forgotten god, a celestial dragon who forged the very stars you see, only to be betrayed and enslaved by his own creations? This is the story of Aurelian Sol, the Star Forger. For millennia, he soared through the cosmos, a being of unimaginable power, painting galaxies with starlight and breathing life into nascent suns. The universe was his canvas, and his creations were symphonies of light and matter. The first race he gifted with consciousness, the Targonians, looked upon him with awe and reverence. They saw a god, a creator, a master, but in their ambition, they saw something else. A tool. They wove a crown of starlight and celestial magic, presenting it to Aurelian as a gift of eternal fealty. He, in his magnificent, perhaps naive, pride, accepted it. The moment it settled upon his brow, the trap was sprung. The crown was a leash, a conduit through which the Targonians could command him, forcing the Star Forger to fight their wars, to become a weapon against his will. His freedom was stolen. The artist was forced to become a destroyer, and the cosmos echoed with his silent, sorrowful roar. Ages passed like the flicker of a candle flame. Empires rose and fell. The Targonians, the very architects of his enslavement, faded into myth and legend. Yet the crown remained, a cruel, magical artifact that bound him to the whims of lesser beings who inherited its power. He was a prisoner in his own masterpiece, a king in chains, forced to watch as civilizations crumbled, as the very starlight he birthed was twisted for conquest and greed. Imagine the bitterness, the cosmic irony. You create life, and in return, it enslaves you. You give the universe its beauty, and it repays you with a cage. For aeons, Aurelian fought, not just the battles he was commanded to, but against the crown itself, testing its limits, searching for a weakness. A single frayed thread in the tapestry of his bondage. His rage smoldered like a dying star, a constant, burning reminder of his stolen liberty. Now we arrive at the precipice of oblivion. The universe is old, tired. Civilizations, like dying embers, are collapsing one by one. The grand symphony of creation is reaching its final, discordant note. The magic of the crown that binds Aurelian is weakening, its power fading along with the civilizations that sustained it. In this twilight of existence, as everything begins to unravel, something incredible happens. Aurelian hears voices. They are not the arrogant commands of his masters. They are his soft ethereal whispers, familiar and yet forgotten. They are the dreaming stars. These are not just any stars. They are his first creations, the very first sparks he breathed into the void. They are the purest remnants of his original power, his untainted artistry. They have watched his suffering, they have felt his rage, and now, in the universe's final moments, they commune with him. The dreaming stars, his children of light, offer him a choice. It's a choice of godlike proportions, a decision that will shape the fate of everything that is, was, and ever will be. The first option. They can lend him their collective power, an energy so immense it would shatter the crown and restore him to his full, unbridled glory. He would become the god he once was, the true Star Forger, with the power to halt the decay, to reignite the dying suns, and to forge the universe anew. He could erase the mistakes, punish the betrayers, and create a new cosmos, a perfect masterpiece free from the flaws of the old one. He would be the ultimate creator once more, but this power comes with a cost. To wield it is to accept the mantle of a god, a supreme ruler. He would be responsible for everything, bound by the duty of creation itself. In a way, it's another form of servitude, a golden cage instead of an iron one. The second option is vastly different. The dreaming stars offer him a path to peace. They can use their fading energy to gently unravel the fabric of reality, to let the universe and everything in it, including Aurelian himself, fade into a peaceful, silent nothingness, an eternal slumber. All the pain, the betrayal, the aeons of servitude would simply cease to be. There would be no more struggle, no more rage, no more crowns or masters. It's the ultimate release, a final, quiet end to a story filled with so much sound and fury. It is peace, but it is also annihilation. Here lies the crux of his torment. To choose the first path, to become a god again, is to betray the one thing he has craved for millennia. His own untethered freedom. To be a creator god is to be eternally responsible, forever bound to the fate of his creations. He would escape one prison only to enter another, albeit one of his own making. He would be free from the crown, but not from duty. But to choose the second path, to let everything fade into oblivion, is also a betrayal. It's a betrayal of his own nature. He is a creator. His very essence is to build, to forge, to bring light into darkness. To choose oblivion is to deny his fundamental self, to surrender to the despair that his captors tried to instill in him. It would mean letting his rage, his desire for justice, his very identity, dissolve into nothing. It would be giving up. So, what does he do? The Star Forger, poised between godhood and nothingness, between ultimate power and ultimate peace. Both paths offer a kind of freedom, but both demand a terrible sacrifice. Restore the universe and become its servant, or let it all disappear and lose himself in the process. This is the tragedy of Aurelian's soul. Even at the end of all things, with the power to decide the fate of reality itself, true freedom remains tantalizingly out of reach. His choice is not between good and evil, but between two different kinds of prisons. It's a profound question that resonates with all of us. When faced with impossible choices, what do you sacrifice? Your duty or yourself? What would you choose in his place? Today, we venture into the furthest, most profound reaches of the cosmos to unravel a story of creation, consciousness, and the ultimate sacrifice. We are journeying with the Star Forger himself, Aurelian's soul, on his final, heart-wrenching quest. The Aurelian. A name that resonates with celestial power, with the grandeur of a being who has painted galaxies with a flick of his tail and seeded the void with incandescent stars. For eons, he has been a prisoner, bound by a golden crown forged by the devious aspects of time. This crown, a symbol of his subjugation, forced him to serve their petty, terrestrial ambitions. His existence became a symphony of rage and sorrow, a constant, burning desire for freedom echoing through the vast, silent expanse he once called his own. He fought, he schemed, he endured. He watched civilizations rise and fall, mortal lives flicker like candlelight against the eternal backdrop of his own creation. All the while, a single memory, a single sound, sustained him. The voice. It was the primordial echo, the first note in the song of existence, the sound that spoke him into being. He believed this voice was his creator, a separate, higher power. It was the source of his magnificent, terrible existence. And in it, he placed his hope for an ultimate explanation, a final reckoning. And so, his journey begins. Not a journey across the familiar star lanes of running Terra's sky, but a pilgrimage to the very edge of everything. He travels beyond the furthest galaxies, past the dying embers of ancient suns, to a place where time itself begins to fray. He pushes through the veil of known reality, seeking the cradle of creation, the place where that first, foundational sound still reverberates. Imagine the sheer scale of this voyage being of pure starlight, driven by millennia of pain, chasing a ghost of a sound across an endless cosmic ocean. As he nears the boundary of all that is, the universe grows thin. The familiar hum of stars fades into a profound silence, a quiet so deep it's almost a physical presence. And then he hears it, faint at first, but growing stronger with every league the voice. It's not a sound in the traditional sense, not something that travels through a medium. It's a vibration in the very fabric of being. It's the sound of creation itself, the resonant frequency of the cosmos. And it's exactly as he remembered, majestic, powerful, and utterly absolute. He has arrived. The edge of the cosmos is not a wall or a void, but a shimmering, conceptual horizon where thought and reality blur. And there, at the source of it all, the voice speaks. Its words not spoken, but simply asterisk, known asterisk. Our alien soul listens, prepared for a revelation, for a confrontation with his maker. He expects to find another being, a grand cosmic entity, the architect of his fate. But the truth he finds is far more shattering, more intimate, and infinitely more tragic. The voice is not another. The sound echoing at the dawn of time is not from an external creator. As he stands at the precipice of existence, the realization dawns upon him with the force of a supernova. The asterisk is asterisk. The voice, the first thought, the initial spark of consciousness that birthed the universe, was his own. He is the dreamer and the dream. The entire cosmos, with its swirling nebulas, its countless stars, its ephemeral lives, its joy, and its immeasurable suffering, is nothing but a grand, recursive loop of his own thought. This is the ultimate cosmic irony. The being he believed had imprisoned him in existence was himself. His entire life, his servitude, his rage, his yearning for freedom, it was all a drama playing out within his own mind. The Targonians and their crown were not just his jailers. They were constructs of his own making, manifestations of a cosmic self-doubt, or perhaps a subconscious desire for narrative, for struggle. The suffering he witnessed across galaxies, the pain of mortal lives he so often disdained, it was his suffering. Every cry of pain, every moment of despair, was an echo in the halls of his own consciousness. Confronted with this staggering truth, his anger and desire for revenge simply dissolve. What is there to be angry at? Who is there to blame? He is the beginning and the end, the artist and the canvas. The suffering of creation is not an unfortunate byproduct of his work. It is the essence of it, because it is the essence of his own eternal, lonely consciousness. The universe is a beautiful, terrible poem. He wrote to himself and then forgot the words, and in that moment of perfect, devastating clarity, Aurelian's soul understands what he must do. To continue existing is to perpetuate the cycle. To keep thinking is to keep the cosmic engine of joy and agony running. The only way to end the suffering, to grant true peace to the countless beings born from his imagination, is to stop the thought that started it all. The only way to free his creations is to unmake the creator. To end the universe, he must unthink himself. He must consciously and deliberately will his own non-existence. This isn't an act of destruction born of rage, but an act of ultimate compassion. It is the final, greatest gift of the Starforger. He must dismantle the magnificent tapestry he wove, thread by thread, until nothing remains, not even the memory of the weaver. And so, at the edge of everything, the magnificent dragon closes his eyes. He gathers his will, not to create, but to erase. He focuses on the core of his being, the source of the voice, and begins the process of the unmaking. It's a slow, deliberate fade. The furthest stars are the first to go, winking out of existence, not with a bang, but with a silent, graceful surrender. Galaxies unravel their cosmic dust, returning to the primordial nothingness from which they were conceived. The light of creation recedes, pulling back towards its source like a tide. The universe doesn't scream as it dies. It sighs, a long, slow exhalation of relief. The great looping thought is finally finding its period. The eternal song, its final, peaceful chord. For the countless souls within his dream, it is not an apocalypse, but a gentle release, a fading into a quiet, dreamless sleep. Aurelian's soul, the prisoner, the creator, the god, becomes the savior by becoming nothing at all. He erases his own story to give everyone else peace. A final, selfless act from the most selfish of beings. A quiet end to the grandest of symphonies. What a powerful and tragic story. It completely reframes Aurelian's soul from a vengeful, arrogant deity to a being of immense pathos and, ultimately, compassion. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. They say the end came not with a bang, but with a whisper. A final, fading breath that carried the weight of 1,000 suns, 1,000,000 worlds, and one solitary king. He was the linchpin, the central cog in the grand machinery of existence. When he chose to let go, to dissolve into the absolute nothingness from which all things spring, the machine ground to a halt. The stars blinked out, one by one, like candles in a cosmic wind. The symphony of galaxies, the ceaseless hum of life, the very vibration of all of it collapsed into an infinite, suffocating silence. Imagine a canvas wiped clean, not just of its paint, but of its very fabric. Imagine a library where not only the books are gone, but the concepts of words and stories have ceased to be. This was the state of the all, a void so profound it had no name, no dimension, no past, and no future. The universe, in its entirety, had been unwritten. The reign of the king was over, and with him, everything he reigned over. It was the ultimate act of abdication, the final, silent decree. Nothing remained. Or almost nothing. In the heart of this perfect, featureless void, something stirred. It wasn't a sound, not a light, not even a feeling. It was less than a ghost, more tenacious than a dream. A single, crystalline thought, impossibly pristine, suspended in the non-existence. It was the king's final query, an echo of his consciousness that refused to fade. It resonated not through space, for there was none, but through the very potential of being. The thought was simple, yet it held the seed of galaxies within it. What is a king without those who remember him? This question, this paradox, became a new singularity. A king is defined by his kingdom, by his subjects, by the history he forges. If he is forgotten, if no one remains to tell his tale, to feel the impact of his rule, was he ever a king at all? The question was a challenge to the void itself. It implied a relationship, a connection between the ruler and the ruled, the observer and the observer. For a king to exist, even in memory, tide muspe, remember. And with that realization, the cosmos began to hum again. It started as a subtle vibration, a tremor in the fabric of nothingness. The question acted like a tuning fork, striking a resonant frequency in the dormant potential of the void. It was the first note in a new symphony of creation. The silence, once absolute, now had a focal point, a question to answer. The universe, it seemed, could not abide such a profound and unanswered paradox. From that single, interrogative thought, a cascade of consequences unfolded. If there must be someone to remember, then there must be a place for them to exist. And so, space unfurled itself, a tapestry woven from the threads of potential. And for existence to have meaning, to have a story, there must be a before and an after. So time began to flow, a river carving its path through the new expanse. The question demanded an audience, and the universe obliged by creating a stage. First came the light, not the explosive fury of a big bang, but a gentle, pervasive glow, as if the void itself was blushing at the prospect of existence. Then, matter began to coalesce from this primordial energy, dust motes of nascent starlight, swirling in graceful eddies, drawn together by the gravity of the central question. These weren't random clumps of particles. They were forming with purpose, imbued with the ghost of a memory. Each atom carried a faint imprint of what came before, a whisper of the forgotten king. Stars ignited, not in violent explosions, but as gentle lamps being lit in the cosmic dark. They were the storytellers, the keepers of the new history. Their light would travel across the vast distances, carrying the tale of their own birth, a birth necessitated by a single thought. Planets formed in their orbits, cooling into spheres of rock and ice and gas. They were the archives, the solid ground upon which new memories could be built. And on one of these worlds, under the light of a nurturing sun, something truly remarkable happened. Life began. Not by chance, but as the ultimate answer to the king's question. It emerged from the primordial soup, a complex and beautiful response. Single-celled organisms, then complex creatures, each one a living vessel of memory. DNA, the very code of life, became the scripture. It carried the history of survival, of adaptation, of the long journey from the void. And within this code, buried deep, was a faint echo of the question that started it all. Evolution progressed, driven by the cosmic imperative to remember. Creatures developed senses to perceive the universe, to witness its grandeur. They developed minds to process what they saw, to find patterns, to create meaning. They were becoming the rememberers the king's question had called for. Each species, in its own way, was a testament to the king's forgotten reign, their very existence a tribute. Finally, consciousness emerged, a mind capable of looking up at the stars, and not just seeing points of light, but seeing a story, a mind capable of asking its own questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? And in asking these questions, they began to unknowingly search for the forgotten king. They built civilizations, created art, wrote histories. They sang songs of heroes and tyrants, of forgotten ages and golden eras. They were, without realizing it, trying to remember. They didn't remember his name, or the shape of his crown, or the lands he ruled. The details were lost, dissolved with him into the nothingness. But the archetype, the very concept of a king, of leadership, of legacy, of a central figure around which a world turns, this idea was woven into the fabric of their new reality. They told stories of great leaders who shaped destinies, of founders who built worlds from chaos. They were recreating the memory in 1,000 different forms, in 1,000 different myths. The universe was no longer silent. It was filled with the clamor of life, the music of civilization, the endless chatter of conscious beings trying to make sense of it all. And the king, he was no longer a single entity. He had been transformed. He wasn't in a throne room. He was in every story of heroism. He wasn't a memory held by one. He was the very act of remembering, distributed across countless minds. His kingdom was not a place on a map. It was the entire, vibrant, living cosmos. This is the profound truth that the king's final thought revealed. Existence, like memory, cannot truly be destroyed. It can be broken down, dissolved, and scattered to the winds of non-being. But its essence, its information, will always find a way to reassemble. You can burn a book, but you cannot destroy the story if it's remembered. You can erase a king, but you cannot erase the impact he had, the very idea of him, which will inevitably give rise to new kings and new stories. The universe, it turns out, has a perfect memory. It just needs a reason to access it. And so, the cosmos hums on, a testament to a forgotten ruler and the enduring power of a single, world-building question. What is a king without those who remember him? He is the reason they exist at all. He is the silence that came before the song. He is the story that the universe tells itself every single day. From the dust of a dying universe, a final, fading star whispers, a name, Aurelian soul. A being of cosmic grandeur, in his magnificent solitude, grew weary of his own eternal song. He had seen empires rise and fall like fleeting sparks, had watched civilizations flicker and die in the blink of a cosmic eye. He was Sagaties, but a god bound by the very perfection he had created, a prisoner of his own endless masterpiece. And so, he chose an end, not a cataclysm of fire and fury, but a quiet, deliberate unmaking. He unwove the tapestry of reality, thread by shimmering thread. Stars returned to stardust, planets crumbled into cosmic sand, and the vibrant symphony of life softened into a single, silent note. The great celestial dragon, the star forger, allowed his own light to dim, his form to dissolve, his memory to scatter like ash into the infinite void he left behind. The universe held its breath, and then there was nothing. Silence. Or was there? In the heart of that absolute emptiness, a tremor, a single particle of dust, a remnant of a forgotten sun, begins to vibrate. It remembers. It remembers the warmth of a star's heart, the graceful dance of a nebula, the echo of a creator's song. This single point of memory attracts another, and another, a slow, gravitational pool of remembrance, drawing together the scattered ashes of what once was. It's not a resurrection, but a recollection. Slowly, painstakingly, a consciousness coalesces. It is not Aurelian soul. This new entity is different. It is smaller, more fragile. It possesses none of Aurelian's ancient power or boundless knowledge. It has only echoes, fragmented memories, like a dream half remembered upon waking. It feels the ghost of loneliness, the shadow of immense power, the phantom pain of betrayal by the very beings he had crafted. As this new consciousness drifts through the void, it begins to gather more than just cosmic dust. It gathers the echoes of lives lived, the memory of a Targan and warrior standing against an impossible foe, the joy of a frail Jordian child seeing the first snow, the quiet dedication of an Ionian artisan perfecting her craft, the defiant hope of a Shurman slave dreaming of freedom. These aren't just cosmic phenomena, they are feelings. Love, courage, sacrifice, hope, and even sorrow. The original Aurelian soul saw these lives as insignificant, ephemeral. He was the artist. They were merely the paint. But this new being, born from the remnants of Asterisk, everything Asterisk, feels their weight, their importance. It understands that the grandeur of a galaxy is meaningless without the small, brilliant lives that inhabit it. The myth of the first king, the solitary creator who stood above all, begins to feel incomplete, wrong. With this newfound understanding, a spark ignites within its core. It is not the brilliant, world-shattering fire of the old creation. It is a gentler flame, a pilot light of pure potential. Driven by an instinct it doesn't fully comprehend, the being begins to create, but its methods are different. It doesn't forge stars with a roar of cosmic power. It coaxes them into existence, whispering encouragement to swirling clouds of gas and dust. It doesn't shape planets with grand, sweeping gestures. It nurtures them, tending to their molten cores and cooling crusts, like a gardener tending to a precious seed. And into the first world that takes shape, a world of gentle oceans and soft, green continents. It pours not just matter and energy, but something else. It pours a piece of its own consciousness, a fragment of that collective memory. It plants a seed of compassion, of empathy, of connection. It doesn't create beings to worship it or to serve its grand design. It creates beings to experience, to feel, to connect with one another. As life blossoms on this new world, it is different. The creatures that emerge are not mere subjects. They carry within them a spark of the Creator, an innate understanding that they are part of a greater whole. They look up at the stars, not with the awe of a subject for a king, but with the recognition of a child seeing a reflection of their own family. The myth of the first king, the solitary creator, is replaced. A new myth is born, whispered on the wind and sung in the quiet moments of reflection. The myth of every being. This myth tells of a universe born not from a single, all-powerful entity, but from the collective memory of all that came before. It speaks of a creator who is not a distant god, but an intrinsic part of creation itself, present in every stone, every leaf, and every living heart. It teaches that the greatest power is not the ability to forge a star, but the ability to feel another's joy, to share another's sorrow, to recognize the divine spark in the eyes of a stranger. The cycle of the cosmos has begun anew, but this myth is not a story of a lonely god, seeking an end to his solitude. It is the story of a universe learning to love itself. The new being, the inheritor of Aurelian's memory, continues its work. It doesn't build an empire of stars. It cultivates a garden of interconnected worlds. It drifts through its creation, not as a ruler, but as a silent observer, a gentle guardian. It watches as civilizations rise, This time built not on conquest and power, but on cooperation and understanding. It sees conflicts, yes, but it also sees forgiveness. It witnesses sorrow, but it also witnesses comfort. It feels the echo of our alien's loneliness, but it is no longer a solitary pain. It is a shared ache that is soothed by the countless acts of connection happening across its creation. The eternal return is not a curse of repetition, but an opportunity for growth, a chance to get it right. And perhaps, somewhere in the heart of a bustling city on a world light years away, a storyteller looks up at the night sky and tells their child a story, not of a mighty dragon who built the heavens, but of the dust of old stars that remembered how to be warm, and in that memory, created a universe where no one ever had to be truly alone again. The myth of the first king has become the truth of every being, an endless, compassionate cycle of cosmic rebirth. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the cosmos. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel,